There's a moment almost every American experiences when they first spend real time in Australia. They think they understand the country. They know the beaches. They know the accents. They know about kangaroos, barbecues, and the famous Australian laid-back attitude. Then they have one completely normal conversation with an Australian, and somehow they've broken a social rule they didn't even know existed. The strange part is that nobody stops them. Nobody gives them a warning. Nobody explains what they did wrong. They just get a look, maybe a pause, maybe a tiny change in the conversation, and the American walks away thinking everything went perfectly, but it didn't. Because Australia has a whole set of unwritten social rules that locals learn almost automatically. And today, we're counting down 10 Australian social rules Americans often learn far too late. Some are harmless. Some can make you look rude without you realizing it. And number 1 is the rule that can completely change how an American is perceived in an Australian conversation. So if you're American, pay attention. Because the next time you visit Australia, one of these might save you from an incredibly awkward moment. And if you're Australian, I want you to tell me how many of these Americans actually get wrong. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Don't make everything about yourself. Imagine an American walks into a group of Australians and meets someone for the first time. The conversation starts normally. They talk about where they're from, what they do, where they're staying, and what they think of Australia. Then the American starts telling everyone about their achievements, their job, their house, their university, their business, their expensive vacation, their success. In America, confidence can be attractive. Talking about what you've accomplished can be perfectly normal. But in Australia, there's often a different social instinct. Australians can be uncomfortable with people who appear to be trying too hard to impress everyone. There's a reason Australians have a reputation for bringing people down to earth. It's not necessarily hostility. It's often a cultural preference for humility and not taking yourself too seriously. An American might think, I'm just telling them about myself. An Australian might think, why are you trying so hard to prove something? And here's where it gets interesting. Australians themselves can absolutely talk about their achievements. The difference is often in how those achievements are presented. If you're successful but can laugh at yourself, that can go a long way. If you walk into the room acting like everyone should be impressed, you may discover something very quickly. Australians have a way of making sure nobody gets too far above everyone else. And that brings us to number 9. Number 9. Don't confuse friendliness with instant friendship. This one catches Americans all the time. Australians can be extremely friendly. They may joke with you. They may ask where you're from. They may invite you somewhere. They may tease you 5 minutes after meeting you. And an American might think, wow, I've already made a new friend. Maybe, but maybe not. Australian friendliness and Australian friendship aren't always the same thing. Someone can be warm, funny, relaxed, and incredibly welcoming without considering you a close friend yet. And that distinction can be confusing for Americans because American social culture can sometimes involve very enthusiastic friendliness. Someone might say, we should totally hang out sometime. And it can be understood as a genuine invitation. In Australia, casual friendliness can sometimes be exactly that, casual friendliness. So if an Australian jokes with you, don't immediately assume you've entered their inner circle. Let the relationship develop naturally. Because if you try to force closeness too quickly, you may accidentally make things uncomfortable. And if you're enjoying these little cultural differences, hit subscribe because this channel is all about the everyday Australian things Americans notice only after they experience them. Now let's move to number 8, because this one involves something Americans usually do without even thinking about it. Necessarily need to announce it. If you're intelligent, you don't need to prove it every 30 seconds. If you're wealthy, you don't need everyone to know. If you're important, you can still make a joke about yourself. And if you're meeting Australians for the first time, one of the best things you can do is simply relax. Because here's the strange part. An American may arrive in Australia thinking they need to impress people. They want to show confidence. They want to be friendly. They want to tell stories. They want to make a strong first impression. And ironically, the harder they try, the more unnatural the interaction can become. Meanwhile, the Australian sitting across from them may be thinking, just relax, mate. First, and that may be the biggest lesson of all. You don't always win people over by talking more. You don't always make friends by proving how interesting you are. Sometimes the easiest way to connect with Australians is to stop performing and just participate. Listen, joke, ask questions, laugh at yourself, Let the conversation breathe. And don't be afraid to admit you don't understand something. Because nobody expects a visitor to know every Australian social rule. What matters is whether you're willing to learn, and that's what makes Australia so interesting. The country may look familiar to Americans. It's English-speaking. It has modern cities. It has huge roads, familiar brands, familiar technology, and a culture that can seem relaxed and recognizable. But underneath all of that are tiny social rules that can make everyday life feel completely different. The way people joke, the way they complain, the way they disagree, the way they handle silence, the way they talk about success, the way they decide who feels like part of the group. And sometimes those tiny differences matter more than the obvious ones. So now I want to hear from you. Australians, what social rule would you add to this list? Americans, have you ever accidentally broken an Australian social rule without realizing it? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you enjoyed this Australia through American eyes comparison, subscribe to the channel, because we're going much deeper. We're going to look at the Australian habits Americans misunderstand, the everyday rules that feel completely normal to Australians but strange to Americans, and the things Americans notice within their first week in Australia. Australia and America may speak the same language, but sometimes they don't speak the same social language. And once you understand that, Australia starts to make a lot more sense. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.